Coming in at number 5, we have the Bangara Fort, India. The Bangara Fort is a 17th century fort built in Rajasthan, India, originally being built by the Bhagwant Das for his younger son Madho Singh. According to legend, a Sadhu, also known as a holy person, named Baba Balak Nath lived within the fort area, and it was his injunction that any house built in the precinct of the fort should not be taller than his own, and if the shadow of any such house fell on his, it would result in destruction of the fort. Another tale states that a wizard adept in black magic fell in love with a beautiful princess who had many suitors. One day the wizard followed her to the marketplace and offered her a love potion. However, she refused, throwing it onto a large rock that consequently rolled onto the wizard and was said to have crushed him to death. However, before his death, it was said that the disgruntled sorcerer put a curse on the fort, which resulted in folks fleeing and the site remaining uninhabited. If you prefer your vacations to be on the spiritual side, you can visit the fort. However, its crumbling rocks and abandoned structures make it incredibly unsettling. You have been warned. Coming in at number 4, we have the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel, Canada. The Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel is an historic hotel located in Banff, Alberta, aka one of my favourite places on earth. Got it right here. Banff. The entire town is situated in Banff National Park, with the hotel overlooking a valley towards Mount Rundle. The hotel opened its doors back in 1888 by the Canadian Pacific Railway as one of the earliest of Canada's Grand Railway hotels. In 1926 though, a fire destroyed the original structure, with a replacement being built in 1928. As of right now, the hotel welcomes many tourists from around the world who want to explore the beauty of Banff. However, it gets a tad more gothic once you get inside the hotel. The Calgary Herald has reported that the hotel houses several ghosts, including a bride who was said to have fallen down the stone staircase during her wedding, which is tragic and absolutely devastating. However, there is a less upsetting one. Sam the bellman is also said to be a lingering ghost at the Banff Springs Hotel. He worked there until 1975 and claimed he would come back to haunt the hotel after he was gone, and that he did. According to some, he supposedly pulls shifts to help people with their bags before disappearing into thin air. In at number 3, Obvodny Canal, St. Petersburg, Russia. Obvodny Canal is the longest canal in St. Petersburg, Russia, which in the 19th century served as the southern limit of the city. The canal was dug in 1769, and by the late 19th century, after the Industrial Revolution, it had effectively become a sewer collecting wastewater of adjacent industrial enterprises. Nowadays, the channel is very shallow. Navigation is allowed, but only for small crafts. Running 5 miles through the city, the canal since goes by another name, a much more sinister name, Suicide Canal. Ever since the canal's construction back in the 18th century, strange events have surrounded the area, some of which included the construction workers complaining of headaches, sudden outbursts of violence, and of course, as the name states, suicides. Now, while most attempts were successful, those who survived their attempts have claimed that they didn't know why they jumped in the water, and that it felt as though an invisible force was pulling them off the banks and into the murky depths. Some even claim that the force comes from the restless souls lurking beneath the water, with some survivors even claiming to see a woman in white floating in the water before suddenly disappearing. Very spooky indeed. So if you ever find yourself in St. Petersburg, I would suggest steering clear of the Obvodny Canal. Coming in at number 2, the Stanley Hotel, Colorado. The Stanley Hotel is a colonial revival hotel located in Colorado, approximately 5 miles from the Rocky Mountain National Park. The hotel was built by Freeland Oscar Stanley of Stanley Steamer fame and opened its doors on July 4th, 1909 as a resort for upper-class Easterners and a health retreat for sufferers of pulmonary tuberculosis. Now, more importantly, the Stanley Hotel served as the inspiration for the Overlook Hotel in Stephen King's novel The Shining, as well as the filming location for the 1997 miniseries. In the fall of 1974, Stephen King and his wife stopped for a night at the old hotel, during which time the hotel had fallen on hard times and was a ghost of its former self. Upon arriving, King learned that the hotel was closing for the winter and that only a skeleton crew would remain. Despite that, the couple checked into room 217, the presidential suite, and were the only paying customers there at the time. That night, according to King, he had a nightmare in which he saw his young son being chased down the hallway of the hotel by a possessed fire hose. He woke up in a sweat, stepped onto the balcony for a cigarette, and by the time he went back inside, he had worked out the bones for what would eventually be his third novel, The Shining. Honestly, that story gives me chills. Despite a peaceful early history, in the year years following the release of The Shining, the hotel gained a reputation as a setting for paranormal activity. Not to mention, it has hosted numerous paranormal investigators appearing in shows such as Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures. On top of that, the hotel offers guided tours which features spaces reputed to be exceptionally haunted. And finally, coming in at number 1, we have Castle of Good Hope, Cape Town, South Africa. The Castle of Good Hope, known to the Cape Town residents as the Castle, is a fort built all the way back in the 17th century by the Dutch East Indian Company and is the oldest existing building in South Africa. The fort was built to act as a replenishment station for ships passing the treacherous coast around the Cape on voyages between the Netherlands and the Dutch East Indies, now Indonesia. The fortress was said to have housed a church, a bakery, workshops, living quarters, shop cells, and various other facilities. In 1936, the castle was declared an historical monument, making it the first site in South Africa to be protected. However, like the rest of the numbers on this list, the castle is home to some otherworldly residents. Back in the 1700s, Governor Peter van Noot was said to have condemned several men to be hanged to death, with one of the men cursing the governor from the gallows. Creepier still, Van Noot went on to die later that day of a heart attack. According to the official website of the castle, his ghost has been haunting the grounds ever since. Coming in at 5, West Virginia Penitentiary. Opened all the way back in 1875, the West Virginia Penitentiary in Moundsville is said to be one of the most haunted prisons in the states. The first building constructed on the site was the North Wagon Gate, which was made with hand-cut sandstone. The state used prison labor during the process, and work continued on this first phase up until 1876. Following completion, the prison consisted of the North Wagon Gate, north and south cell blocks, a kitchen, dining area, hospital, and chapel, as well as a 4-story tower connecting the 2 administration buildings. The prison also included space for female inmates and personal living quarters for the warden and his family. Once the prison opened, it housed 251 male inmates, including some who helped construct the prison where they were incarcerated. The condition of the prison worsened throughout the years, and the facility was eventually ranked as one of the top 10 most violent correctional facilities. On Wednesday, November 7, 1979, 15 prisoners escaped from the prison, one of them being Ronald Turney Williams, who was serving time for murdering Sergeant David Lilly of the Beckley Police Department. He managed to steal a guard's weapon and reach the streets, where he encountered 23-year-old off-duty state trooper Philip S. Kesner, who was driving past with his wife. Kesner attempted to take action against Williams, but he was shot in the process. The prison was home to riots, fires, and nearly 100 executions during its time in operation. To this day, visitors have reported sightings of phantom inmates and a shadow man wandering the premises, as well as unexplained voices and cold spots. You can take tours around this haunted penitentiary and even view the electric chair dubbed Old Sparky. For you brave souls out there, you can also do an overnight session if you dare. Coming in at 4, North Bend Rail Trail Tunnel number 19. North Bend Rail Trail is located in Ritchie County in West Virginia and is a favorite for hikers, cyclists, and horseback riders traversing the 72-mile-long trail. However, proceed with caution if you wind up in the area, particularly around tunnel number 19, also known as the Silver Run Tunnel. History goes that on one foggy evening in 1910, an engineer spied a young woman in a flowing white dress standing on the tracks. He brought the train to a stop, but when he searched for the woman, she had vanished. He wasn't the only one to spot her either, many of his predecessors had as well. No one quite knows the origin of the woman in white, although some bones were found under a house near the tunnel. Some people say you can still spot her. Now, those who explore the tunnel are advised to bring a flashlight even during the day, with the tunnel being over 1,376 feet long, which is beyond sunlight's reach. You have been warned. Coming in at 3, Droop Mountain Battlefield. On November 6, 1863, the Battle of Droop Mountain occurred in Pocahontas County, West Virginia during the American Civil War. Confederate forces engaged but failed to prevent Union forces under General W. W. Averill from a rendezvous with other Federal troops in a joint raid on Confederate railways. Droop Mountain was one of the largest engagements in West Virginia during the war and essentially resulted in the Confederate collapse. The battlefield site is now preserved and administered by West Virginia as a state park, and the unknown Confederate dead are buried in the Confederate Cemetery at Lewisburg. A wooden observation tower, hiking trails, and picnic tables mark the grounds where the Civil War soldiers fought, died, and some say still remain. Many visitors have reported sounds of galloping horses and sightings of the ghosts of headless Confederate soldiers, as well as one soldier lying asleep against a tree. Coming in at 2, Lake Shawnee Amusement Park. In the late late 1700s, the Clay family moved to West Virginia, which is presently known as Mercer County. The Clay family, comprised of Mitchell and his wife, settled on an 800-acre farm and raised 14 children. However, in 1783, tragedy struck. While Mitchell was out hunting, a few members of the Shawnee tribe killed 2 of the Clay children and burned another at the stake. In retaliation, Mitchell hunted down a handful of Native Americans and killed them. The land in turn became unoccupied for years, up until the early 1900s when Conley T. Snyder purchased the land and built a small amusement park on it. However, the amusement park had just as unfortunate luck as the Clay family. The park featured a Ferris wheel and a swing ride and was popular among locals, particularly families of coal miners who resided in the area. In the early 1950s, a young girl on the swing ride was killed when a truck delivering sodas accidentally backed into the ride, striking her. Another child also drowned in the swimming pool, which was subsequently filled in to prevent further accidents. During its operation, at least 6 people died at the park, which resulted in the park ultimately closing in 1966. In 1985, Gaylord White, a former employee of the park, purchased the land with plans to reopen it. It happened for a brief period, that is, before the park closed again after a 1988 archaeological dig uncovered numerous Native American artifacts, as well as human remains on the property that had been buried prior to the arrival of the Anglo-European settlers. In total, 13 skeletons were uncovered, mostly of young children. Perhaps the property is cursed, or perhaps it's just a series of unfortunate events. Who knows? But one thing is for sure, it is one of the most haunted places in the entire world. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum. The Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, also known as the Western State Hospital, was a Kirkbride psychiatric hospital that operated from 1864 to 1994 by the government. Originally built by Richard Andrews, it was constructed from 1858 to 1881 and was originally designed to hold 250 people. However, it became overcrowded in the 1950s, with the hospital housing 2,400 patients, resulting in it being forcibly closed in 1994 due to changes in patient treatment. Following its closure, it was then purchased by Joe Jordan in 2007 and is open for tours and other events to raise money for its restorations. During tours of the facility, witnesses have reported doors slamming, shadowy figures, and even blood-curdling screams from within the building walls. The asylum has garnered such a spooky reputation. It has appeared on shows such as Ghost Stories, Ghost Hunters, Ghost Adventures, and Paranormal Lockdown. It was also featured in Bethesda's 2018 video game Fallout 76 under the name Fort Defiance and acted as a base for the Brotherhood of Steel, one of the game's main factions. Coming in at number 5, we have Chateau de Brissac, France. Chateau de Brissac is a French chateau located in the Brissac-Quince areas of the commune of Brissac-Lory-aux-Bois. That's the best we're getting. The property is owned by the Brissac family, with the head bearing the title of the Duke of Brissac. It also has a very unique history, with King Louis XIII and his mother Marie de Medici meeting in 1620 to discuss their neutral territory of the chateau. However, these talks didn't last long, with the Queen Mother being banished. Now, according to locals, the chateau is best known as being the home of the Green Lady. She is said to be the ghost of King Charles VII's illegitimate daughter, Charlotte of France. History tells that Charlotte was killed by her husband after he caught her having an affair, and the outfit she was killed in was a green dress, hence the name, the Green Lady. According to visitors, she is often reported to be roaming the chapel's tower room, and has also been heard moaning in the early hours. As of today, the chateau is open to the general public for tours and even overnight stays in the guest rooms, with its theatre hosting the annual Val de Lory festival. However, if you do opt to stay the night inside of its walls, just keep an eye out for the Green Lady. Coming in at number 4, we have the Toll Booth from Aberdeen, UK. Located in Aberdeen, Scotland, the Toll Booth is the oldest building in the city, constructed between the years of 1616 and 1629, with it being attached to the Aberdeen Sheriff Court on Union Street. The Toll Booth is a former jail which now operates as a museum. However, like everything else on our list, it is reported as being one of the most haunted places in the world. As I said, the Toll Booth was constructed as a prison, even housing Aberdeen's first guillotine for the criminals, with it still on display there today for the public to view. In 1630, a woman by the name of Marion Hardy became a prisoner at Toll Booth for supposedly practicing witchcraft, and it was in the Toll Booth that she suffered quite a brutal death, with her being strangled and burned in front of a watching crowd. In the mid-1700s, it later became a place where children were housed before being sent off to live in American colonies. Now, for a place that witnessed so many murders, executions, and torture, it should come as no surprise that it is reported to be incredibly haunted. haunted, with it even catching the attention of paranormal investigators, including the television series Most Haunted. Visitors to the prison museum have reported hearing chains rattling, footsteps, keys, as well as spotting a 4-foot-tall man wearing 1920s attire. Very spooky indeed. Coming in at number 3, we have Hill of Crosses, Lithuania. The Hill of Crosses in Lithuania may be the most remarkable location we have on our entire list, because as the name suggests, it is quite literally a hill filled to the brim with crosses. The Hill of Crosses is a site of pilgrimage in northern Lithuania, with the precise location being uncertain. According to historians, it is said that the first crosses were placed there after the 1831 uprising. Year after year, crosses, crucifixes, and even statues of the Virgin Mary have been brought to this location, with the exact number of crosses now being unknown. However, some reports state between 55,000 to 100,000, which is insane. Back in 1993, my year of birth, Pope John Paul II visited the Hill of Crosses, declaring it to be the place for hope, peace, love, and sacrifice. Now, over the years, crosses have been placed there for many reasons: to express a desire for Lithuanian independence, and like I stated before, as a form of defiance following an uprising in 1831. During Soviet occupation between 1944 to 1991, the crosses were bulldozed 3 times by the Soviets. However, locals were persistent and they kept rebuilding. A BBC reporter visited the site back in 2017, stating, I quote, "As the wind blows across the fields of rural Swalia County, ornate rosaries clink against metal and wooden crucifixes, filling the air with eerie chimes. As you would expect, a place like this filled with such history and such unrest is reported to be haunted, with many visitors to the site experiencing strange goings-on and a general sense of unease amongst the crosses." Coming in at number 2, we have Aradale Asylum, Australia. Also referred to as the Aradale Mental Hospital, this is a former psychiatric hospital located in Ararat, which is a rural city in southwest Victoria, Australia. Originally named Ararat Lunatic Asylum, this was commissioned along with 2 other buildings, Kew and Beechworth, to house the growing number of, I quote, lunatics in Victoria. The asylum at the time was a sprawling complex, with it estimated that around 13,000 people died there during its operation. However, not all of these deaths were attributed to natural causes. Some were said to have been tortured and even murdered. Each and every year, tours take place at the former asylum, with it being reported that the ghost of Nurse Kelly is said to haunt the walls, specifically the women's wing of the hospital. Visitors to the asylum have reported feeling ghost hands touch them, cold air in certain spots, and unexplainable sensations. The asylum was decommissioned back in the early 1990s, with many of the patients being transferred to community living. It has since become a campus of the Melbourne Polytechnic, administered by Melbourne's Polytechnic Ararat Training Centre. And finally, in at number 1, we have Myrtles Plantation, USA. Located in St. Francisville, Louisiana in the United States, Myrtles Plantation is a historic home and former antebellum plantation that is rumored to be one of the most haunted homes in all of the United States. Now, like all famous ghost stories and haunted house stories, the plantation is rumored to be built atop a burial ground, specifically an ancient Tunica Indian burial ground. Back in 1796, the home was constructed by General David Bradford and was named Laurel Grove. He resided there for several years until President John Adams pardoned him for his role in the Whiskey Rebellion that took place in 1799. Quite the history. People came and went from the home, and during the period of 1854, the home was officially renamed the Myrtles, after the crepe myrtles that grew in the vicinity. It's said that around 12 ghosts haunt the Myrtles Plantation, with 10 of them supposedly having been murdered inside of the home. However, historical records only report the death of William Winter, a former attorney who lived in the plantation from 1865 to 1871. He was ultimately shot by a stranger before he staggered inside of his home and died on the 17th step of the stairs. Visitors to the plantation often report hearing his dying footsteps, as do employees in the hotel, which is of course what it is now, a bed and breakfast specifically, that offers historical and mystery tours. It doesn't just stop there though, many also report sightings of the ghost of a former slave, as well as a haunted mirror that is said to hold the ghost of Sarah Woodruff and her children who once resided in the home. Very spooky indeed. If you're feeling adventurous, go book yourself a room. Just be careful when ascending the stairs and looking in the mirror.
Kicking us off at number 5, we have the St. Louis Cemetery, number 1. The first of 3 Roman Catholic cemeteries in New Orleans, this is a legendary site for ghost spotting, although you'll need a vetted tour guide to get in. Break this rule and who knows what kind of curse you'll incur. The cemetery is full of above ground tombs, which some refer to as cities of the dead. These vaults are largely from the 18th and 19th centuries, although some of the graves date back to early 1700s. Of course, with all sorts of above ground burials, one would expect to see plenty of ghosts here. Visitors claim to see manifestations of ghosts walking around, and an abundance of amateur photographers claim to have captured ghost orbs on film. Digital too. Some ghosts are more famous than others, but at the St. Louis Cemetery No. 1, none are as well renowned as Mary Laveau. The voodoo queen of New Orleans, Laveau made a name for herself through fortune telling, occult studies, and herbal medicines. These days, gawkers claim to see her floating through the cemetery where she's buried, wearing her signature bright colored clothing and white turban. Guests have reported being scratched, pinched, shoved, or even coming down with sudden unexplainable illnesses after seeing her ghost. For many years, followers of the occult would visit her tomb and mark it with 3 X's, but this led to more severe vandalism and it has been refurbished since. Laveau isn't the only ghost to roam the graves, but she is definitely the most well known. Just watch your back if you choose to visit and stick with the tour guide. Next up at number 4, the Hanging Jail. The Gothic Jail of De Ridder was built in 1915. Anything Gothic has a higher chance of being haunted, it's just how architecture works. That's why the Notre Dame is so full of ghosts. That and the whole Claude Frollo situation. Spirit appreciators in the know believe that the jail is haunted by 2 men hung for the slaying of a taxi driver. Joe Genna and Moulton Brasseau hired a taxi driver late one night and told him to drive. For reasons still up in the air, they killed him. Not knowing what to do with the body, the 2 men dumped it in the old Pickering Mill pond and ran off into the night. Maybe they drove off. I wonder if they took the cab. The body was found and traced back to the 2 would-be on-the-run murderers, and such they were convicted and then hung from the 3rd floor gallows. The interesting thing about the gallows though is that a spiral staircase circles around the noose. So there's a vertigo-inducing set of stairs surrounding the ominously hanging noose. Definitely a ghost creator if I've ever seen one. In addition to this lovely feature, there's also an underground tunnel connecting the jail to the next door courthouse. That is a tunnel you would not want to find yourself in after hours. Who knows what kind of crooked-necked wailing ghosts you find down there. Of course, there are plenty of people who claim to have captured photos of the ill-fated duo along with many other unlucky lawbreakers. Just remember kids, if you want to be a ghost, constantly do things that you'll regret. That way, you'll have all sorts of reasons to stick around for the afterlife. Coming in at number 3, we have the Dauphine Orleans Hotel. What was once a bordello is now a very popular hotel and bar. Jilted lovers, recovering soldiers, mistreated women, they all have a chance to haunt this New Orleans landmark. Of all the stories, there are 4 that tend to come up no matter who you ask. The first is that of a lost bride, thought to be the spirit of a young woman named Millie. She was working for the bar as a courtesan when she met a dapper young man and they decided to get married. However, on the morning of the wedding, Millie's groom-to-be was shot dead in a gambling dispute. Distraught, Millie waited for days for her fiancé to show up and never took her wedding dress off. For years, she would wear the white dress around the bar, hoping that someday he would show up. Now her ghost wanders the hotel in her dress, waiting for her love. Another classic story is that of the dancing girl. A young teen has been seen dancing around in the ballroom. Many a drunk guest has claimed that a young girl helped them to their room, all the while dancing as if she were floating on air. There's also the tale of the rebel, a ghost dressed in a dark Confederate uniform. While no battles took place in New Orleans, plenty of wounded soldiers would end up in the city for rest and recovery, and maybe a little bit of time at the bordello. This ghost has been seen pacing the outer courtyard, earning the nickname the Worried General. And of course, the bar itself, known as May's Place, is full to the brim with ghosts. Employees claim to have seen all sorts of unexplainable stuff, from glasses falling down from high shelves to locked doors opening up on their own to brochures swirling around like fall leaves. If you're looking for a haunted overnight stay, the Dauphine Orleans is probably your best bet. Don't go paying any of the ghosts for services though, you probably won't get what you're expecting. Coming in at number 2, Myrtles Plantation. Built in the late 1700s, this is considered by some to be one of America's most haunted homes. Made extra legendary by the multiple photographs taken featuring ghosts, you'd be hard pressed to find an ectoplasm enthusiast who hasn't heard of young Chloe. Chloe was a young slave punished for eavesdropping on the family. She took her revenge later on in the form of a poisoned birthday cake. It was served up to the owners of the house, and within 3 hours, 3 people were dead. Apparently that wasn't enough revenge for one lifetime though, as Chloe is still said to haunt the plantation. 2 different pictures have been taken with apparent ghostly qualities to them. One is a photo of the facade of the house, and if you look carefully in the corner, a ghostly visage can be seen. Another is of 2 tourists taking a selfie in front of a window, and Chloe can be seen peering out from in front of the curtains. While famous, some folks claim that they could be doctored. What do you think? After the Chloe incident, many later owners suffered death and murder tragedies while living at the house. Their ghosts have also been seen roaming the grounds. These days, most of the scary stuff is directly ghost related, so I don't know if it's still dangerous or just a spooky tourist attraction. Maybe the spirits like the attention they're getting from the public and would rather not kill anyone else. And finally at number 1, the Lalaurie Mansion. Back in the 1830s, the Lalaurie family was extremely well-to-do, especially Delphine Lalaurie. She was a well-respected member of society and known for throwing lavish parties. All was well and everyone had their fun until disaster struck. A fire swept through the building, burning much of it to the ground. Among the rubble, firefighters found the bodies of chained and tortured slaves in a hidden chamber. It appears that Delphine would perform unnecessary surgery on these poor helpless folks too. By the time all this was figured out, the Lalauries had fled the country, never to be seen again. With no way for justice to be served, the souls of the people held here remained, looking for revenge. Pretty much all future owners of the property quickly left after moving in. The ghosts haunting the walls are pretty aggressive too, with many people reporting bizarre physical assaults by forces unseen. Today, ghost hunters say that it's the most haunted house in the French Quarter. Historians dispute this, but that's not going to stop the phantom fans from traveling to the haunted mansion.
Coming in at 5, Casa de los Tubos. Also known as the House of Tubes, this is perhaps one of the most popular haunted places in Mexico because of its exemplary spiral make and cylindrical hallways. Specifically, one house in Monterrey, Mexico has caused a lot of buzz amongst locals as well as urban legend fanatics. According to some sources, there is a very famous legend about an abandoned building called the House of Tubes, a strange structure built in the 1970s but was never inhabited. From the outside of the house, it looks almost like a set of grey concrete tubes standing on end, and on the inside the hallways are cylindrical in shape. One side of the house also has a series of ramps that lead to upper floors, and on the side the levels are connected by large stairs. Now the legend goes that the house was built by a wealthy couple who had a paralyzed daughter. The father of course wanted to create a special home that was custom made just for her, hence the ramps leading from floor to floor, allowing her to move freely in her wheelchair. However, when construction began, her father took her to see the new home, during which time 2 of the architects who designed the property died after concrete fell on them. However, the construction continued. After construction, the father returned with his daughter, who decided to test out the new ramps going up and down from floor to floor. However, her parents looked away for just a few moments when their daughter's wheelchair suddenly started to slide backwards down the ramp. She was unable to stop herself and the girl went flying out of the open window, falling to her death. The home was left abandoned, but visitors report seeing a little girl stood near the window she fell from, as well as the sounds of weeping from the lost soul. Coming in at 4, House of Mummies, Guanajuato. In the city of Guanajuato lies Mexico's most eccentric museum that has quickly sparked ghostly rumors. The museum houses naturally mummified bodies interred during a cholera outbreak around Guanajuato, Mexico in 1833. The bodies were supposedly disinterred between 1870 and 1958, during which time a local tax was in place requiring a fee to be paid for perpetual burial. Bodies for which the tax was not paid were disinterred, and some, those in the best condition, were stored in a nearby building. Now, the cause of the mummification is a unique combination of mineral-rich soils and an extremely dry climate, and according to locals, the preserved bodies have been known to move, whisper, and even weep. As of 2007, the museum continued to exhibit 59 of the total 111 mummies in the collection. The mummies are a notable part of Mexican pop culture, echoing the national holiday, the Day of the Dead, as well as the B-movie titled Santo vs. the Mummies of Guanajuato, which pitted well-known professional wrestler Santo and several others against reanimated mummies. Coming in at 3, the Tasquana Station, Mexico City. Perhaps one of the most haunted spots in the wide networks of public transportation in Mexico, this station holds the reputation of being the scariest station on the metro route. Many locals believe the station to be haunted, with an elderly man reported reportedly haunting solo commuters who were waiting on the platform. However, don't fret, he is said to be friendly. Rumor has it the man died during an assault at the station and is now lingering around the station, protecting passengers from a similar fate. Whether you find this scary is up to you, but personally I wouldn't travel solo through the Tijuana station. I've known time for evil or friendly ghosts, just saying. Coming in at 2, Posada del Sol, Mexico City. In the center of Mexico City lies the ruins of the Hotel Posada del Sol, an abandoned hotel that is perhaps one of the most haunted sites in all of Mexico. Now, this once upon a time magnificent structure was the project of Fernando Saldana Galvan. However, during the same time, Fernando ended his life in the hotel's courtyard after being buried in debt. Now, the Posada del Sol lies abandoned and coated in lifeless graffiti and tales of the supernatural. However, what adds to the eeriness of the hotel is the tale about the spirit of a dead young girl, who is believed to be wandering the underground chambers of the hotel. According to reports, the girl was found dead inside the hotel, which surprised authorities considering no common man can enter or even tour the hotel. However, those who have found a way often offer sweets and candy at the altar located in the macabre basement out of respect and love for the young girl. To add more mystery to the hotel, it is rumored it was actually built to perform human sacrifice as part of a satanic ritual. However, this story has never been confirmed. As of today, the hotel rests as a decrepit shell of a shattered dream, crumbling behind a tall fence and heavy security. Would you ever attempt to enter the haunted Posada del Sol? I wouldn't. And finally, coming in at number 1, the Island of Dolls, Mexico City. Located in the channels of Xochimilco, south of Mexico City, is where you can find this terrifying and haunted island, aptly named the Island of the Dolls, which houses broken and deteriorated dolls of various styles and colors that were originally placed there by former owner of the island, Julian Santana Barrera. Dolls hang from the branches of trees with many missing heads or limbs. The former owner, Julian, lived in the area for more than 50 years and began his collection to fend off evil spirits after he found the body of a drowned young girl in the lake, which in turn resulted in him hearing whispers in the night which he believed were coming from the girl. So, to appease the spirit, he began to hang the dolls, placing them all around the island. Sadly, however, in 2001, Julian met the same fate as the young girl, even drowning in the same place. Following his death, the island quickly became a major tourist attraction, with some visitors even claiming to see the dolls move or even talk. However, for those seeking a thrill, the Island of Dolls is a little tricky to access, with the only way of getting to it being via Trajinera. However, most rows will happily transport people across the island, with the journey taking approximately 1 hour. However, those who refuse usually do so because of superstitions.